Hi friends, welcome to the channel. Hit the like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment with an emoji just for the sake of engagement.
Chapter 1. As the night sky was illuminated by the brightly lit moon, we see our female lead running through the woods, trying to get away from a mysterious figure chasing her. Panting and gasping for breath, yet she didn't stop even when the blonde was requesting her to because she knew if she did, she would die. No, it wasn't because he had an infectious disease but because she somehow entered a place she wasn't supposed to. But we can talk about that later since now she has bigger things to worry about. She regained consciousness a few minutes ago and realized she was at a place she couldn't recognize with a man she didn't know, and that man was calling her by a different name. Although shaken, she realized that she was way too close to him, as she could feel his schlong pressing into her. The man, clearly about to nut, was blaming her for his situation because she was driving him crazy. The blonde tried to kiss her and suggested they leave via the ship to his kingdom as they didn't have much time. But strangely, instead of her cooperation, he was met with hostility and was shoved against a tree. She asked him for his identity, but the guy was only thinking with his dick and told her that she was stuck with him now because they had come too far. As he stood up, he requested that she just address him by his name, Emer. She was confused by the strange names he was using, but upon asking for a clarification, was only met with his lusty advances. At first she struggled and pleaded with the man to let go of her but soon had to use force when the pervert attempted another kiss. She pushed him again and ran for her life, calling him a pervert, which made him stagger and fall. While running, her brain went into overdrive trying to think of any possible explanation. All she knew was that she was going home on her bicycle when this time Buscoin did the job. What happened? Girl, you died. Anyway, as she was running away from that man, she thought of those names. Even though they were strange, she had a feeling she had heard it from somewhere. Suddenly it hit her. They were the names from a novel she used to read. I tell you what, personally, I think she is a vegetable and is imagining weird stuff. But before you guys start forgetting your names, quickly hit the subscribe button. Peace. She realized that he was none other than Emer, the second prince of the kingdom of Roca, which meant that she certainly was in the novel, and she was none other than Empress Belita, the villain who died first. Belita was the notorious empress of the Carton Empire from the novel The Flower on the Battlefield. She was also known as the adulterous empress because she needed dick every day. I mean, who doesn't? According to the novel, she was just like the girl next door in any video from Pornhub. In the story, Belita and Emer eloped and tried running away but were caught and then beheaded. In the present, she realized that if she hadn't taken her body, Belita would have screamed and died with an embarrassing posture. But her bad luck was that she dropped off in exactly that scene. Ditching her heels, she ran like crazy, zooming through the forest she had never been to like it was her backyard, thinking if she could run away from that pervert, she might have a slim chance. But she instantly crashed into someone who was built like a tank because he didn't move an inch, and girl fell 6 feet away. Upon seeing the person she crashed with, her face turned white. He had the golden eyes of a tiger and was as murderous as a dragon's breath. Do I really have to say it? It was her husband, Tada. Okay, no seriously, it was her husband and the person who was about to kill her. Kalik the Tyrant. She was about to ask her husband to save her, but her words were cut short when Emer came crawling through the bushes. Girl, how the hell were you running if he has to crawl? Seeing the emperor, Emer got on his feet and started dusting himself, asking what he was doing there, but someone came behind him and knocked the daylights out of him. Soon many knights came and were using him to level the forest floor. But our heroine, being the sweet girl, couldn't bear to see the torture. She quickly addressed Kalik as His Majesty and was about to ask for his forgiveness when Kalik interrupted and told her that she seemed to have forgotten his name because of the slurping he was busy with. She realized that she was supposed to call him by his name, but since it wasn't mentioned in the novel, not wanting to die at his hands, she quickly thanked him for saving her from the pervert, but Kalik found her amusing. He raised his sword to her throat, asking her what she meant. Belita nervously replied that she indeed was running away from that prince for her life, but her plea was met with Kalik asking her if she was sure she was not running from him. Belita tried explaining herself, requesting him to look at her state, and pleaded for him to believe her. Our girl was a loner in real life and never dated anyone, let alone had an affair, So she didn't want to die like that because of the sin she had not committed, as it would have been unfair for her to die as the worst cheater of all time. Finally, she used her last trump card, asking Kalik whether they weren't married. That did the trick as he paused for a moment, but all of a sudden his sword began glowing, and he was about to attack. Our girl thought her new life was cut short, blaming Belita for everything, but she accepted her fate as she didn't have the power to change the storyline. As the sword hit the target and blood splattered everywhere, Kalik asked her to open her eyes, and when she did, she saw that the target was not her head but a snake that was minding its own business. Kalik finally stepped forward and asked her if she really was his wife, asking her to prove it. Kalik wanted to tie her hair and get to work, but he just wanted some tongue action. Dazed by his generosity, her eyes widened, realizing she wasn't going to die. She began to think about what he wanted. But once she realized that they were way too close, she understood. Since this body was already married, she kissed him quickly on his cheeks, but our poor boy frowned because he was looking for that tongue-on-tongue action. Finally, he decided to grow a pair and pulled her in for a long, wet, moist, damp kiss. Chapter 2. While kissing him, she felt crazy because up until now she was a loner. Don't worry, girl, you both are loners. She was surprised to see that this body still remembers what to do with the man as they were lapping up juices. But as she let her killer devour her, she fainted. Later, when she regained consciousness, she realized that her whole body was aching. I'm not going to make any jokes here. Wondering why it was hurting her so much. She saw that she was in a beautifully decorated and well-maintained room. At first, she believed that she was just dreaming, but when she saw the wounds from last night, she realized that it actually happened. She couldn't believe that she was actually in Belita's body. She remembered that sloppy kiss with Kalik, but nothing after that. She was blushing thinking about the kiss beside the dead snake, but didn't understand why she had to be in Belita's body, because she knew nothing about relationships, and Belita was a man-eater. Seeing the Empress awake, a maid burst into the room and fell on the bed crying. It was just an act because, in reality, the maid wanted to sleep in the royal bed just once in her life. And if you guys also want to feel and experience royalty, subscribe. She looked worried, almost on the verge of crying, and told her that she was worried to death because the Empress was unconscious. Belita was startled because she didn't know she had a personal nanny, so she nervously smiled and replied that she was much better now. The nanny suggested that she should take a bath and went on to fetch one for her with marigold flowers because it helps in healing. As Belita went in her bath, she felt relaxed. She began wondering if it was okay for her to be in this body and for her to be alive. Wondering what would happen to the original story. In the story, Belita and Emer were supposed to be beheaded the previous night, because of which the kingdom of Felon and the island kingdom of Roka would lose their prince and princess. Because of that, both kingdoms would join hands and invade the empire, which was the start of the story. The Tyrant, her husband, would lose his mind and, caught in both war and domestic rebellion, would end up dead. Unlike the original story, she was likely worried that Emer, who didn't fear the emperor, might reveal his affair with Belita, but right now she was just glad that she was alive. But soon her peaceful bath was interrupted when a maid came in, telling her that they were ready. Confused, she requested the maid to leave, but when she saw him stripping, she realized that it was a guy and screamed. Her nanny, upon hearing her scream, rushed in and questioned the innocent man. What did he do? But when he innocently replied that he had not started anything yet, she asked him to leave the room immediately. Seeing Belita in distress, she consoled her and suggested she proceed to the bedroom. Drowsy from the past experience, she was drying her hair, thinking about her nice bath. Once again her nanny entered her room, this time followed by 2 butlers, and asked her to lie down for a massage, telling her that her muscles were sore. When Belita once again saw that the butlers were stripping, she lost it. Averting her eyes away from their sexy bodies, her loss, she asked them not to strip and asked her nanny if this really was just a massage. Seeing her reaction, the boys asked the Empress if she had grown tired of them already, wondering if they should expose more of their bodies, but she quickly covered her eyes, asking them to leave. She started blushing because up until now she hadn't even been in a relationship, and now all of a sudden she was in the class close proximity to so many naked men. Wondering how many men did Belita keep on top of her. Somewhere else in the castle, the emperor was thinking of their past. His marriage to Belita was arranged, but she chose toys instead of him. Being the only princess of Felon, she was self-centered and relied on Felon's power, but she had only caused trouble for him, which is why she decided to kill her. But instead of abusing her power, she surprisingly thanked him. He was confused because a woman who had played with more than half of the men in the palace blushed like crazy when he kissed her and even passed out. Kalik was confused because of the recent developments and decided to wait and see how long her play lasts. Because he knew once she faltered, he would certainly end her. He called Anton into his room and asked him to bring her to him. Chapter 3. In her room, Belita's nanny asked her if the boys had offended her in any way. She was worried because the Empress's behavior was different. Previously she used to be very energized around the boys, so she asked Belita if she had a problem even with the boys she had selected herself. Belita didn't want any more boys and was tired of being surrounded by men. She realized that if she didn't stop her nanny, she would keep sending them in, so she turned her offer down, telling her that from now on she would not need any men. Which shocked the nanny more than it shocked the men. But they were soon interrupted when Anton knocked on her door. Seeing the commander of the Imperial Guard, she remembered that he must be Anton Cedric, who vowed his allegiance to Kalik. Nanny went over to talk to Anton and looked worried after hearing him. But Belita didn't have to wait much longer since she came back quickly and told her excitedly that the Emperor had invited her to lunch. Belita tried to excuse herself, telling the nanny that she had a headache and asking her if she could say no to the invitation, but her nanny was persistent, asking her if she was out of her mind and that she must attend the lunch with Kalik, as it was the first time in 4 years since their marriage. She thought that Belita was worried about her dress, so she declared an emergency and took charge of dressing her in the finest clothes, deciding to elevate her beauty. Later, after the crisis was averted, she headed to the dining hall, where Kalik was supposed to have lunch with her. Belita looked stunning in a lilac dress and realized that the body she had inhabited must have seduced numerous men with the face and the body. But since she had no experience, she was unable to get used to it and wondered if she should continue to survive in this novel as Belita, but was quickly brought back to her senses when the nanny told her that they should reach the hall as it was not acceptable to make Kalik wait. In the dining hall, we could see Belita and Kalik were sitting at a large table as a lot of fine dishes were presented for them to enjoy, but since the tension in the room was so high, neither Belita could taste anything nor was able to breathe properly. She was worried because neither Kalik killed her like he was supposed to, but now she has even offered to eat together. While eating their meal, she was stealing glances at him and realized that Kalik was indeed quite handsome. Lost in her thoughts, she stared at him for a little too long, which caught his attention, but she quickly averted her eyes to not make the tension worse. Kalik finally spoke, telling her he was surprised she came to the invitation, to which she simply smiled and replied affirmatively, but in her mind she knew that she only did it because she didn't want to die. Kalik told her she had suddenly become a completely different person, asking her if she was putting on an act to avoid death, and frankly told her that he did go to the woods yesterday to kill her. This statement scared Belita and made her shiver, realizing that yesterday was only temporary and Kalik had not changed his mind about getting rid of her. She started trembling, thinking about her death because of what the person whose body she was in had done, but since she was not Belita, she decided not to go with it and not to live in fear. She told Kalik that she has decided to change herself. This statement shocked Kalik. Belita told her that from now on she doesn't want any men near her, telling him that even today she made all the male servants leave, and if she wanted to confirm her story, he could ask the maids who had served her. Kalik was genuinely at a loss for words, so he asked Belita why she did that. She replied that she realized her mistake and told him that she was not doing it on a whim. Hearing her reply, Kalik stood up from the table, and while leaving, told her that he was giving her 1 week, telling her that from tomorrow she would have to see him once a day so he could determine whether her behavior fits that of an empress. But Belita thought it was too often. Kalik asked her to give him an answer, and she nervously replied that she would be happy to. After hearing her, Kalik left the room. When she came back to the room, her nanny asked her what if what she had heard was true, that she didn't need any man and was now planning on behaving while moaning with exhaustion. Belita replied that she was only doing this because of the sword at her throat, which made her worried. Belita realized that she really cared about her, and she decided to be honest with her nanny, revealing that she had lost her memory. Finally, her nanny was satisfied, as it explained a lot about her behavior. But Belita stressed the fact that when she said she didn't need any more men, she meant it. Her nanny smiled brightly, telling her that she understood her problem and was here to teach her everything, and that she remembered and she could trust her. Belita was relieved and thanked her. She was asked to take some rest as her nanny went off to fetch some tea. Belita was happy she found somebody so reliable. Later back in the castle's dungeon, we see someone trying to communicate with a royal knight trying to bribe him by telling the knight he can buy a mansion with the jewelry, but at that moment Kalik entered the basement and reprimanded the knight, telling him that he will also be beheaded. Amor, seeing Kalik, simply chuckled, telling him that he wasn't trying to break out and simply wanted to take a walk because his body was tired from all the beating he got last night. Kalik completely ignored him and simply told him that he was still looking quite well. Chapter 4. In the prison, Emer asked Kalik how his lover was doing. Kalik promptly reminded lover boy that she was still his wife, asking him to worry about himself, but he replied that he was going to make Belita his real wife and not treat her as a puppet. Kalik reminded him that if they did such a thing, they would be killed, but he simply replied that he didn't know Kalik would find them given his indifference. He stated that it was a crime to neglect Belita, who was the greatest lady in his eyes, and any man who saw her would feel their heart pound and their body grow hot. He taunted Kalik by telling him that he would never know that sensation, but Loverboy didn't know that Kalik already had some tongue action the night before. Kalik remembered how he felt when he was in the presence of Belita. His heart was also pounding when they were about to kiss, but he simply stated that Emer was not capable of communication and ordered his guards to take all of Emer's clothes because he looked warm. When the guard mentioned that Emer was foreign royalty, Kalik stated that was exactly why he was ordering the removal of clothes. He can't kill a prince, but it would be quite interesting to see one run away naked. This humiliation angers Emer as he begins shouting. The next morning, as the sun brightly lit the room, the nanny was busy cleaning up her room. Belita was not excited because it was today that she would have to meet her tyrant husband for 1 week, and she had no choice in the matter. Thinking about the short timeline to prove herself made her even tired, but when she came to her window, she noticed the garden outside. She asked her nanny what it was. Realizing that she had forgotten everything, she told her that it was a conservatory and asked her if she would like to visit it today, telling her that she used to spend a lot of time there before. Later in the day when they entered the conservatory, she was surprised to see such a beautiful place and couldn't believe Belita had such a normal hobby. As she was looking around, she noticed that it had a room in it. Before her nanny could stop her, she peeked inside and noticed that it was a sex dungeon, which would make any BDSM master jealous. She finally understood why Belita spent so much time there. She began thinking of ways how she could change this place for her, and seeing her reactions, her nanny also realized that Belita had indeed changed for the better. She was the type of person who wouldn't listen to anyone and always did what she pleased, even cursing and hurting others to get her way. Her nanny was pleased to see the changes and promised to always be by her side. She was happy that the memory loss had brought back her bright smile just like it had before she was married and began crying. When she entered the pink room, she thought that no matter how hidden it was, anybody could make sense of what this room was used for. She was especially worried that if Kalik found this room, she would definitely lose her life. Her nanny came and gave a pamphlet to her, telling her that this was the budget for Mr. Carton's contest. She realized that it was about a contest about finding her toys for play. Nanny told her this was her favorite event, and the bath servants and masseurs were all from this contest. She began fuming seeing Belita's craziness and decided to crumple the paper on the ground. She finally instructed her nanny to cancel the contest, change the room's color to green, and make it a place where people can rest. She told her nanny that she'd be throwing the male servants out from her palace and told her that from that day the palace would not allow men inside except for formal visitations, telling her that it was an order. She decided to clean all the mess Belita had created and not give Kalik any excuse to kill her. Chapter 5. Later that day, Kalik was waiting for their first date in the Imperial Garden. Wearing a beautiful gown, Belita approached Kalik and asked if she was too late, to which he replied that his previous appointment had ended early, so he was here. She was relieved that she had not made Kalik wait for her. But their weird date ended with them just walking for 30 minutes without ever talking to each other. By then her legs were sore. Since she was nervous, she didn't say anything, just kept groaning out of pain. Glancing at her discomfort, Kalik stopped and asked her if they were going to walk more. "What a moron, you invited her here, you moron." Belita was confused at first and asked Kalik if he was going to head back to his palace. Hoping to get rid of the baboon, Kalik simply flicked his fingers, and a group of maids appeared out of nowhere and placed a big carpet in the garden for them to sit on. He sat on the carpet and asked Belita to sit beside him, then he told her that due to the long walk, his legs were sore and asked if she could help him. Belita couldn't believe that Kalik wanted her to massage his legs, but seeing her expression, Kalik asked her if it was too hard for her. Belita wondered if it was a part of the qualification test. She nervously stated that she was good at giving massages and sat beside him, trembling with fear. While massaging his legs, she was wondering what he actually wanted and why he was making her do this, not being able to read his mind. Kalik had died quickly in the novel, because the main story begins with the war. Realizing that the war was meant to happen, she was calculating if she could run off to Felon before the war happened without getting killed by Kalik. She might have a chance to survive. While thinking about a strategy, she kept stealing glances at him. She was certain that he would fail to unify the kingdom as his divine animal never came. He would eventually lose his mind and die a miserable death 1 week before turning 30. She was also sure that even if he avoided death, his enemies in and out of the empire would oust him. She was stricken by his pathetic life, realizing that there was no happy ending for him. She questioned if he was surrounded by enemies because he was a tyrant, but she also knew that he was called a tyrant not because he was a ruthless dictator, but because he is ruthless to his enemies. She somehow felt sorry for him because a death after a lonely battle was not like him. Kalik noticed her behavior and asked Belita why she keeps glancing at him. Realizing she was caught, she replied that she was only checking if he liked the massage. Kalik paused and replied that she was being weirdly obedient today but also told her the massage was excellent, as if she had turned into a whole other person. She nervously replied that she could always do this for him if he asked. When Kalik asked Belita why she was being so obedient, she replied because she was his wife. Kalik twitched at that statement and grabbed her hand, making her flinch. He suddenly pulled her closer and leaned in for a kiss, but when Belita asked if she did something wrong, he replied that although she was his wife, it would be better for her to stop touching his thighs. Realizing her honest mistake, she quickly apologized. Just then the piece of crumpled-up pamphlet entered like an unwanted character to ruin their mood. Seeing the colored paper, he understood what it was and thought this was an agenda misunderstanding the situation. He stood up and told Belita that everything wouldn't go her way and turned to leave, but before leaving, he informed her that he expected her to improve tomorrow, leaving her confused. Chapter 6. In the evening, just before the noble council was about to commence, a maid was helping Kalik dress up. Hearing a horse's cry coming from the garden, he stopped in his tracks, thinking it was his white horse, raciste, but dismissed his thought because he was sure his horse was stuck in his stable where he should be. Animal cruelty. When he looked out from his window, though he did was a saw but it wasn't his. It was an incomplete divine beast summoned by its master Kuro Brunoir. Kalik couldn't believe that the Grand Duke dared to summon an incomplete creature in the Emperor's vicinity, but all he did was glare at him. In the waiting room, the Unified Cavalry Corps were busy bitching about Kalik behind his back cause they were pussies. It was widely known that only those to whom a divine creature many-face itself before 30 could become the Emperor, and the divine creatures are a qualification for the throne, but sadly our lover boy didn't hit puberty yet. The French guy was telling everybody that all the people have been talking about a divine tiger that appeared 2 years ago, but apparently no one even saw a sick one. Duke Jensen was questioning if the Emperor could even get a cat as a divine animal at this point, making everybody laugh. The former emperors didn't have this issue as their creatures appeared naturally when they turned 25. Kalik's father had a black wolf and his grandfather had a polar bear. Coming to the conclusion that Kalik was surely anxious, Grand Duke entered the room, making the sissies stand in attention. He smiled and asked them to continue since he also enjoys bitching about the Emperor. Duke Santanio smiled and replied they had no updates as there was not even a small sign, which made the Grand Duke scoff. To show off his superiority, he brought out his incomplete divine beast, making all the sissies' heart flutter. They even complimented his deformed divine beast because they had none of their own. Changing the topic, Duke Santanio remarked that he was having quite a hard time dealing with all the people who were trying to build a relationship with him, and the others added that no one was allowed to cut in since they had been sucking his D for a long time and should get the cream first. Having fluffed his D long enough, the Grand Duke suggested they should leave for the conference room. While going to the conference room, they were discussing how a baron was still loyal to the Emperor, thinking of him as an idiot, for they were sure the Emperor was about to be overthrown. The Grand Duke suddenly paused and suggested them to mind their words since the walls too have ears. They wanted to question the Emperor's imperial blood since the creature was giving him a hard time and was also busy discussing about his sexual life. They were sure that Kalik was definitely a tyrant, since even someone like Belita was a harlot at heart didn't sleep with him. The Grand Duke suddenly raised his hand and asked them stop talking. When they looked ahead, they saw that it was Belita and her nanny coming towards them. Belita was tired, visibly tired, and looked exhausted, wanting to have a cold cup of black tea as soon as she gets back. Since her whole body was stiff, she figured she must have been nervous. And that she must have been too nervous after the garden episode. Seeing the group, her nanny quickly whispered and informed Belita the people coming towards them were the Unified Cavalry Corps and were led by the Grand Duke. She realized that they were the original villains of the original story, the rotten apple of the Empire who instigated war by summoning a divine horse. Her nanny quickly suggested Belita to give a flat rejection to whatever was proposed to her, especially warning her about the Grand Duke. She told her that he was a dangerous man. She knew she had to bump into the villains one day, but she didn't want any more potential killers because Kalik was enough. The Duke started praising her beauty, telling her that it was an honor for them to meet her, also asking for forgiveness for the slight delay because they mistook her for an angel from heaven. The Grand Duke smiled and kissed her hands, but this sudden advancement was unnerving for her. She jerked her hand away in disgust, which caught the Grand Duke's attention. Raising his head, he questioned why she looked different. His aura made her nervous and gave her cold sweat, and she wanted to get far away from him. HW began wondering if Belita had an affair with him because it wasn't in the book and she couldn't read him. So she decided to calm herself down and replied that she was just tired. But the Grand was on to her, telling her that she definitely looked different. Finally, after being cornered, she gathered up some courage and promptly replied that the Grand Duke was wrong and bid her farewell. Just looking at the eyes of the Grand Duke made her feel nauseous. She understood that although the Grand Duke didn't seem to hate her, but he didn't like her either and couldn't figure out those strange emotions. Later, as she was having the cold black tea, her nanny came to update her about the tasks, telling her that they have redecorated the room inside the conservatory and the Empress's palace now allows only women to enter, and Kalik would be informed about the changes tomorrow. Setting her cup down, Belita decided to ask her nanny if she knew about all the men that she had been intimate with in the past. When the nanny replied that she certainly remembers them all, she asked her if by any chance she ever slept with the Grand Duke. Chapter 7. The nanny was shocked but replied that such a thing had never happened and she had no recollection of such an incident happening. She was even sure that such a thing had not happened even behind her back. Belita was relieved, but she asked her nanny that if she ever sees anybody who has had a history with her, she needs to inform Belita immediately and should not miss out a single one because she wanted to avoid them in the future. Her nanny was very proud of her, seeing how she seems to have become a completely different person over the past few days. Belita smiled and replied that it was time she grew up from being young and immature, making the nanny tear up. She promised that she would always be on her side, and her allegiance was towards her and no one else. In the council meeting room, Grand Duke Dane, the stepbrother of Kuro, was addressing the meeting. The discussion was focused on the war with Yuklo, and the Emperor asked all present to share their unbiased opinions. And one by one, they started coming up with stupid suggestions like developing a special water pouch that never dries, developing a cloak that allows them to secretly infiltrate the enemies, developing special shoes to help cross the desert. All the ideas were stupid, and the Emperor rejected them. Soon the dukes dropped their act, finally asking His Majesty if the war was really necessary since Yuklo has never been conquered. They wanted to focus more on divine creatures than unification because they believed they only had 6 months left. This caught Kalik's attention, and the atmosphere became ominous. Dane was furious, but the dukes argued that they were concerned because, according to them, the unification would not matter if the throne was at risk. Duke Santanio remarked that it would be bitter to pass the crown to the next emperor, but was stopped by an enchanted sword that flew towards him and stopped at his neck. Kalik stood up and replied that they all had forgotten who he was, asking Duke Santanio if he was not crying for death. A worker from the palace was seen trying to pull an envelope from under his cloak. As Duke continued, Santanio trembled for forgiveness. The Emperor simply grinned and his sword flew past the Duke and attacked the spy behind them, spilling blood everywhere. Everyone was shocked and the Duke for real thought he died, but when he felt the cold blood on his hands he started screaming of bloody murder. Kalik reached his latest victim and pulled out the envelope that he was hiding, stating that the Duke was very lucky since somebody else died for him, which left him trembling in fear. He stated that he couldn't believe that the spy didn't even try to conceal his attempt to pass the note, stating that it would be fun for him to start rooting out the rats in the palace. Duke Santanio was trembling seeing the Emperor's power even without his divine animal. Later that day in Belita's room, she was frustrated because she realized she was wasting her potential. She was the second highest in power after the Emperor and was thinking of all the things she could do with this body. She wanted to be the lady of the palace, was thinking all this trying to gain some confidence in herself when the door suddenly burst open. A maid, Lisa, entered her room shouting joyfully, asking her if she had heard about Kalik's latest victim. She took pride in informing her that it was a spy who was killed and stated that the conference room was now covered in blood. Chills ran down Belita's spine when she learned someone had died again, but Lisa didn't stop. She explained the whole event to Belita in detail, asking her if she had fun hearing it. With a stunned expression, Belita replied that she doesn't find hearing about people's death amusing, leaving the maid nervous. She tried justifying her behavior, telling her that in the past she enjoyed hearing such details, but Belita firmly told the maid that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated from now on, asking her to watch her mouth. She stated that Kalik must have had a reason for his behavior. The maid quickly apologized to her, but she was sent out of the room. Lisa was really irritated with Belita. She knew that Belita really liked to swear at His Majesty more than anybody and was wondering if she was somehow scared of him now. While cursing at her, she promised herself that she would get rid of the mask Belita was wearing.
That's all for today. See you in the next episode, friends. Until then, keep reading manga.